Hi guys, it's October, and you know what that means, right? It means it's still 100 freaking degrees in Texas for some reason. It also means Halloween is drawing near, and I always like to devote at least one video in October to Monster High, because, obviously, right? But this year I decided to switch it up a little. I've done quite a few Monster High themed videos in the last few months, and I've also gotten a few requests here and there to do a full dedicated video on Bratzillaz. So here I am, doing just that. If you have absolutely no idea what Bratzillaz are, then you've come to the right place. We're going to go over everything, for sure, but just as a quick introduction, Bratzillaz was first released in 2012 by famed toy company MGA as a spin-off of Bratz, who I assume don't need a lengthy introduction, but at this point, Bratz had been around for more than a decade and had been on and off completely dominating the fashion doll market. Now, whereas Bratz was always known for being very contemporary and cutting edge when it came to fashion and aesthetics, Bratzillaz took on a more fantastical, more horror-inspired vibe. And with good reason, because the concept of Bratzillaz revolved entirely around witches. Unfortunately, though, Bratzillaz would only last a year, if that, before its discontinuation. A discontinuation that was very sudden, considering there were plans to continue the line, including dolls that were never produced. So, where did Bratzillaz come from? Why did Bratz decide to take a sudden, darker turn into an aesthetic they weren't really well known for? And why did it seemingly fail so quickly? What sort of plans do they have for the future that will never see the light of day? I assume a good portion of you already know the answers to these questions, but you're still gonna sit around and listen to me ramble about them, right? 'Cause you love me. And for those of you that don't know, well, sit back, get comfortable, go ahead and grab that giant bag of Reese's that you said you were going to hand out to trick-or-treaters but is already halfway eaten, and let's get into it. So to understand Bratzillaz, we must first look at some important context, the world that Bratzillaz was born into. For several years prior to the launch of Bratzillaz, MGA was in a very intense, very fierce legal battle with Mattel, the toy company behind Barbie. In 2008, they lost said legal battle, and for a very, very brief time, the ownership of the Bratz IP was transferred to Mattel. This, in of itself, is very much its own topic with its own very lengthy backstory, but it's important to note here. Luckily for MGA, they would fully regain Bratz in 2010, just in time to relaunch the brand to celebrate its 10th anniversary.
Bratz are back! I like how you brats like that.
Reception to this new 2010 lineup was, I would say, mixed. Today, a lot of collectors go back and forth on whether they like this particular era, and I definitely don't see it as fondly remembered as, the early and the mid-2000s Bratz. I also get the impression that MGA themselves were just not super invested in this particular relaunch. A lot of the promotion and the marketing just feels very lackluster and also kind of incomplete. Like, they put an episode of a Flash animated webisode series, and it was literally just the single episode, and they never touched it again.
Wait! What's going on?
It's been 14 years, and we still haven't found out what was going on. And, the dolls from this time aren't bad. In fact, there's some really good ones, but they're also just not domineering the toy aisle the way that they used to. But something else occurred in 2010. Something lurking in the halls. Something killer. Something fierce. Monster High. It was Monster High. And as we all know, that was an immediate success. Monster High was a $1 billion franchise within 3 years of its debut. Billion with a B. And not only was it monetarily successful, it was also a pop culture phenomenon. Monster High was everywhere. And Bratz, what are they saying on Twitter now? They wanted some of Monster High's nachos. And apparently this is kind of a controversial thing to say, but I mean, come on. I'll come out right and say no, I don't think Bratz ever intended to copy Monster High, but I don't think Bratzillaz would exist without Monster High, and that's not a bad thing. It's just business. It's competition. Mattel did the exact same thing with My Scene after Bratz launched, and I personally like when this happens because I think brand loyalty is stupid, and we always get some great dolls out of it. Anyways, Bratzillaz was soft launched around summer of 2012 with an official press release that has apparently just vanished off the face of the earth. I actually searched everywhere for it. I love how nothing stays permanent on the internet anymore. Isn't that great? Shout out to Dolly Confessions on WordPress, though, for preserving a passage from it. I will link down the full post below. The enchanted good witch cousins of the popular Bratzillaz, takes girls on a supernatural flight of imagination and discovery to reveal their own inner secrets and special powers, including the ability to communicate with animals, fly through the air, see into the future, and to find true love. Designed to encourage a girl's imagination to dream big, the powers of Bratzillaz will magically appear in retail toy aisles and young girls' hearts in July 2012, along with images of the first wave of dolls, and the reception was, well, okay, to be fair, I was very active in the Monster High collecting community when this announcement dropped, and therefore, I probably saw the most negative reactions. I do remember the initial reception being very negative, accusing Bratz of copying Monster High, not liking how the dolls looked, but I do also remember people warming up to them pretty quickly too, with a few concessions. I do remember a lot of people clowning specifically on the artwork, and I can kind of see why. I have no idea why they went with this art style. It looks actually nothing like the dolls do, and the grayscale was also kind of a strange decision too. But let's talk about them. The dolls, I mean. So, like I said, these are pretty different to what Bratz has offered up to this point, and not just in the sense that they're so aesthetically different, but they also introduced inset eyes, which Bratz had never done up to this point, and the bodies were a little different too. They had full articulation, and their feet aren't removable, which was a pretty standard feature for Bratz, which quite a lot of people took as Bratz wanting their bodies to look more like Monster Highs. All that said, I think Bratzillaz are beautiful, just some absolutely gorgeous, gorgeous dolls, and the first wave, their debut, was pretty strong. The characters are very visually interesting, there's some great designs, and looking at them, you immediately know, yes, these are witches. You see exactly what they're going for, and from here on, they only get better. We'll get there. I do have to mention that Bratzillaz used polypropylene, which is known as a very unpleasant hair fiber. The worst offender by far was Megana in the first wave, and especially now, like, oh, that poor girl. Some were better than others. Most were pretty manageable, I think. But Megana, she was kind of beyond help, which is unfortunate because she's otherwise such a beautiful doll. Which is, speaking of characters, that's an important thing to talk about too, because, okay, it cannot be overstated how much Monster High influenced the business model of fashion dolls. Because Monster High wasn't just a doll line. It was a media franchise. It had characters with distinct personalities and backstories with ongoing storylines. And they're not the first doll line to ever do this. No, but they definitely made it sort of a standard. And Bratzillaz followed that business model very closely. Because Bratz, I mean, it had sort of a storyline. Sort of. It had an animated series and movies and everything, but storytelling was never a big priority for MGA. Continuity was not a big priority, and Just never has been. That's not something they've ever heavily invested in. Until now. So Bratzilla's launch mirrored Monster High's in a lot of ways. There was a live-action music video. There were webisodes, which we'll talk about, and there was a backstory. So the characters in Bratzillaz are not actually the Bratz as we know them. They are actually their cousins, who just so happen to also all be in a friend group, and also have very similar names. Except in Jade's case, where her cousin just straight up has the exact same name as her. Here's where I should also mention another big criticism. Even though these are technically different characters from a fiction standpoint, from a marketing standpoint, they're basically the Bratz. And because of that, Bratzillaz caught a lot of flack for lightening the skin tones of Yasmin's and Sasha's counterpart, which, yeah, why do that? But each character has her own special power and motifs that'll continue to be used throughout all their dolls. Yasmina Clairvoya can see into the future, Megana Broomsticks can fly, Sasha Bella Paws can talk to animals, Cloetta Spilletta can change anything and everything, and Jade Jador can heal broken hearts. They also all had their own pets, which, yes, was another thing Monster High was very well known for. In the case of Bratzillaz, you could buy the pets separately, or some editions of the first wave of dolls included the pets with them. By the way, I realize that at some point you've probably asked the question, why are they called Bratzillaz? How does that invoke witchcraft at all? Why choose a name that makes it sound like they're less the girls with the passion for fashion and more like the girls with a passion for destroying metropolitan cities? I don't know. I truthfully, honestly, have no idea, and I don't think anyone does. And trust, they were clowned on very heavily for this name, to the point MGA even took notice and eventually rebranded the line to be named Bratzillaz House of Witches, with more emphasis on the second part there. And to also talk about the webisode series mentioned before, well, there's truthfully not a whole lot to say. There's 10 episodes that each run about 3 minutes each, so if you're really curious, I would honestly recommend just watching them all through. The series follows this main group that we just introduced as they start their first term at the Bratzillaz Academy of Fashion and Magic. And one thing I'll say, the webisodes themselves look very polished. The aesthetic is nice, the art style is nice, the character models are all well done, and the animation is pretty smooth. And the series as a whole is fun, it's cute. So episode 9, Midnight Beach, is actually the last episode that was ever officially released. The end of that episode, however, showed clips from previous episodes, and also a clip from an episode no one had ever seen before, which led everyone to believe that there would be more. Because the discontinuation of Bratzillaz was so sudden, though, that episode was never officially released. At least one additional episode has been leaked online, though, after about a decade or so of being considered lost. It's called Fashion Bites, and it is available to watch on YouTube, but it's actually not the episode that was seen at the end of episode 9. So very likely there are just a bunch of unreleased Bratzillaz webisodes, very likely an entire season 2 that was just never released. However, there is an additional series called Bratzillaz Witchy Princess's Adventures, which came around summer of 2013, and this is where I assume the budget just completely ran out, because it looks like it was made with nothing but Windows Movie Maker and a dream. There's no animation, or really anything to speak of except text and the occasional image that features the girls' stock photos standing around various locations. I know I keep jumping from one topic to another, but that's sort of how you have to format these kinds of videos. But next we get to talk about the most important thing: the dolls. As I said before, I really love the Bratzillaz dolls. They're really beautiful, really well designed most of the time, and the inclusion of the inset eyes adds such a unique charm to them. In person especially, they're just gorgeous. So 2012 really only saw the release of the core girls and their pets, but we got a few more lines that next year, before Bratzillaz was cut short. Magic Night Out was a dance party themed line that included all 5 main girls, plus a new character named Vampalina. This line had a function where if you swiveled the doll's waist, they moved like they were dancing. Fun. Really cute line though, and Vampalina is a really striking doll, really beautiful. I always kind of thought that they sort of gave up with Cloetta here, though she definitely doesn't stand toe-to-toe with the other girls here. There was a budget line which featured less articulation and painted eyes instead of inset eyes, and I would say this is admittedly a weak spot for Bratzillaz, not their finest hour. Back to Magic is a line that featured Sasha Bella, Megana, and Jade alongside 2 new characters, Ileana Honesty and Victoria Antique. Gorgeous, gorgeous girls. I love this line. I love the cohesiveness. I love the designs. I think it's so well done. It's definitely one of the more sought after collections by collectors now, and you can see why, right? Looking at this line is what makes me the most sad that Bratzillaz was discontinued so suddenly, because they were making improvements, they were getting better, and I think if they were allowed to continue, we would have gotten some really, really stellar dolls. Midnight Beach was another budget line, but not quite as budget as the other one. This one is obviously a beach-themed line. All the girls came in swimsuits, and also with glow-in-the-dark skin. There was another new character in this line too, Fiona Finns, who is actually the only Bratzillaz doll I currently own. The last main line to come out of Bratzillaz, if I remember right, was the Witchy Princesses, who you might recall from their Windows Movie Maker adventures mentioned before. This was a new trio of characters: Angelica Sound, Carolina Past, and Sierra Calmer. Ask me why they have bird cages on their heads. Go on, ask. I don't know. I have no idea. For the drama, I suppose. Interestingly, the Witchy Princesses Adventures series includes artwork of a character who was cut from the line, Vanessa Speakers. She was replaced by Carolina Past in the final lineup for unknown reasons. Another line to come out of Bratzillaz was Switch a Witch, which was a set of dolls you could build and customize. Each set included 2 complete dolls whose body parts and clothes and wigs could be swapped around to your liking. And yes, I have to mention that Monster High, before this, had come out with their Create a Monster line, which was essentially the same thing. However, Create a Monster, or at least the early sets, were pretty notorious for not having complete dolls. The sets only included 1 torso between them, which is why I think MGA proudly proclaims 2 doll bodies on the packaging there. There was a playset, Cafe Zap, a line of fashion and accessory packs, and then nothing. Bratzillaz was officially pulled off the market in late 2013. However, this wasn't actually limited to just Bratzillaz, nor was it entirely Bratzillaz's fault. True, Bratzillaz couldn't really compete with Monster High in the way MGA had hoped, but the Bratz franchise as a whole was sort of floundering. Attempts to revitalize the brand from 2011 to 2013 just weren't connecting. Sales weren't great, and it was clear that Bratz was in a pretty rough patch and needed some serious work done, especially if they were to go up against Monster High. So MGA made the decision to put everything Bratz on a hiatus until further notice, which was officially put into effect in 2014. This would eventually result in the 2015 reboot, which very noticeably was a completely different look for Bratz. And again, that is sort of its own topic, but it's clear that something like Bratzillaz just did not have a place in the new direction for the brand. But our story doesn't end there. Not completely, because we do have some visuals of some unreleased products. what could have been. There was a sizzle reel that showed off what was presumably a new core line. I'll link the full video down below, but the new characters included were Corinithia Unicornia, Ludwina Crawls, Eloise DeFries, Abracadaver, Luna Fortuna, and Cassandra Von Bird. And these are obviously prototypes, not the final versions that would have been released, but I still think, genuinely, they would have been some of the coolest dolls on the market if they had come out. They're so beautiful and creative, and it's really unfortunate that they weren't given a chance, basically for circumstances that were outside of their control. You can also see how much the designs were improving and how much further they were willing to push the line, but what's done is done, unfortunately. And that is the tragic tale of Bratzillaz. Happy October, happy Halloween too, but I will have a video going up closer to Halloween, so I actually don't know what to do for a costume yet. I'm seriously running out of time. If you have any suggestions, please help me. Also, if you've been following my Twitter, you may have noticed that I have some things to announce here. I'll talk about it more in the next video, but it's stuff I'm really excited for. It's your turn now, though. Tell me what you think of Bratzillaz. Did you collect them when they came out? Do you collect them now? Do you love them? Hate them? Whatever's on your mind, tell me all about it down there. Bye-bye. Keep it cute.